everyone. I'm Ronnie.
And I'm Jessica.
And you're listening to Clean With Me,
the podcast where we walk you through cleaning your house.
Thanks for joining me. In today's episode, I'm going to talk you through cleaning your kitchen, and I'm also going to discuss the importance of the opening and closing shift in your kitchen. If you've ever worked in a restaurant, you know that there are people who open, there are people who close, and then, of course, there are people who work shifts in between. So before we get into that, it's time to gear up for our cleaning session. You might want to freshen up a little bit, get into something comfortable yet presentable. I've been talking about this a lot, but self-care is crucial to feeling good, and it affects how you feel about yourself, how others perceive you, and it's just so important. So make sure that you have freshened up a little bit, although you could be listening to this in the evening, and that may not necessarily apply. You might already be ready for the day. Another way to kick off your cleaning session might be to take care of any glaring problems in the entry area or the front room of your home. I know right now my living room is a disaster. That's going to be the first order of business after I'm done here. We've had a lot going on. It's a Monday morning, and sometimes there's just aftermath. Anyway, you might want to straighten that up a little bit. Another thing you might want to do is start some laundry. I'm still trying to kind of come up with a routine since I'm changing my whole lifestyle. I'm no longer working a 40-hour-a-week day job. I just have the podcast. So I'm thinking about implementing a couple different laundry days, but if you need to do some laundry like I do, now's the time to maybe start a load, whether it's your bedding, a kid's bedding, a load of towels, or a load of clothing. We recently got a larger capacity washing machine, and I think that's going to be conducive to doing just 2 laundry days instead of just haphazardly trying to do a load every day or whatever. So that's something to think about there, but maybe you want to get some laundry going and then set a timer on your phone to remind you to switch the laundry from the washer into the dryer. I remember at Jessica's old house, my co-host and daughter Jessica, she had her washer and dryer closet right off the living room. So if she was sitting on the couch folding laundry, she would hear that little signal. When the washing machine or dryer cycle ended, she would hear that little sound. My laundry room is closer to my bedroom, so if I happen to be in the bedroom, I hear the sound. But sometimes I like to just set a timer. I'm the type of person who needs timers for everything, so if you're like me, you might want to set a timer to remind you to do that laundry switch later. This is a kitchen episode, but I'm just giving you some ideas of things that you can do to kind of put your mind at ease so that you don't feel overwhelmed with housework while working on the kitchen. You want to feel presentable. You want your house to smell good. Maybe you need to light a candle or start a wax warmer. Maybe you need to open the windows and air out your house. Maybe you need to take out the trash and reline it. Okay? And maybe you need to get some laundry going. I'm real big on getting the machines running, and that includes your washer and dryer. I like to feel like my house is working for me while I'm cleaning, and the white noise of those machines running in a quiet house tends to relax me. I realize you may not be in a quiet house right now. You may have a house full of people. Just do whatever you need to do to feel at peace and ready to tackle that kitchen. This episode could serve as either a morning or evening routine. We're going to be talking about both. I'm going to be talking about both. So let's get right into the episode. one of the first things you do in any kitchen cleaning session is gather any dishes from around the house. Nobody wants to do their dishes, clean the kitchen, and then find a plate with dried on food on a coffee table or a glass with coffee residue in the bottom of it or something. Nobody wants that. So you want to get everything to the kitchen to begin with, especially if you're using a dishwasher. You want to get as much in there as possible and things like that. So I did get some feedback from one of you, and I've gotten other feedback on this before. Some of you want me to talk more about sweeping and mopping the floors. So I'm going to talk about that at the end of this session. I'm going to talk you through sweeping and mopping your kitchen floor. And of course, if you don't need to do that today, you can be doing some other things during that time, like just decluttering around your house. It's always a good idea to do a walk through, throw away trash, put things where they go, and just straighten things up. You don't want to leave any room unstraightened for any period of time, or you start to have like these dungeons in the back, like in the master bedroom or the spare bedroom. We don't want that. So you can always, if you don't need to do what I'm talking about, you can always do like a walkthrough of your house and just pick up and straighten up. That goes a long way. Once you get all your dishes to the kitchen, it's time to put away any clean dishes. If you're like me, you may have clean dishes in your dishwasher and also in your drying rack. It's time to get that stuff put away. I think sometimes there's a temptation to leave things in the drying rack and then stack more on top of it. It's something kids do, but sometimes as adults we do the same thing. It looks messy to have too much there. And also it can slow you down because you have to be careful how you place things. And you end up doing what I call dish Jenga, where you're building a tower of dishes. No, it's super fast if you don't have to think about where to set the dish after you wash it. And if you're like me, your dishwashing session may be a combination of using the dishwasher or hand washing. If you're hand washing, all the more reason to get that drying rack emptied. Okay. One of the best things to do once you have all your dishes to the sink area is to check if you need to soak anything. You don't want to get into this cycle of perpetually soaking dishes, so you want to soak them while you do the easier stuff and then get to those soaking items at the end of your dishwashing session. They probably don't need to soak all day. That way you can kind of get a clean slate in your kitchen, so to speak, and just be 100% caught up. I know at our house, when we're 100% caught up on dishes, people are more likely to wash a dish that they use or call somebody out, call out a sibling like, hey, you left your bowl out, that's your top ramen bowl or whatever. And they're more likely to keep things clean. It's like if you're at your mom's house and her kitchen's immaculate and you make a sandwich or whatever, you're going to leave it, you're going to leave it as clean as you found it. How about treating your own home that same way? Maybe somebody out there needed to hear that. I don't mean to be preachy or anything, but once you get your dishes put away, and you get a few things soaking, it could be a pan with baked on or dried on food. It could be a glass with some milk residue in the bottom or iced coffee residue. It could be the dreaded top ramen or oatmeal bowl with the dried on stuff. Let's get those items soaking and then work on the easy stuff. Okay, and I realize some of you are hand washing, but based on surveys I've taken, at least 75% of you are using a dishwasher. Just be working on your dishes, whatever that means for you. Once I get things soaking, I will load my dishwasher. And of course, I'm doing a pre-rinse. I have a scrub brush on a handle. I'm pre-rinsing under running water and then placing items into the dishwasher. And because I have just an extreme hard water situation, I have a little seasoning bowl wedged in the top of my dishwashing rack. I pour a little bit of vinegar in there. That's going to apply to you if you're living in the Permian Basin. there's just a chemical problem with getting your dishes clean, and the white vinegar kind of creates that balance. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a chemist, but it's something I discovered online, and it was a game changer for us. And before we lived here, when we were in Sacramento, California, when we were in Fort Worth, Texas, we didn't need to use vinegar when running our dishwasher. Okay, we just used whatever. We even used cheap dish detergent sometimes, but I use a couple ounces of vinegar, at least 1 ounce, wedged in a bowl in the top rack of the dishwasher. And I also use like the Cascade Platinum pods and just whatever rinse aid. Okay, that's the formula at our house. And one good thing about the little seasoning bowl is, and just be loading your dishwasher or hand washing, whatever you need to be working on. But one good thing about the little seasoning bowl is I can tell when the dishwasher has run, because that's filled almost to the brim with water after the cycle. When I put the vinegar in, I'm only filling that little dish like a third of the way. When I see it completely full, I know the dishwasher completed its cycle. And I've heard of some people putting 1 cup or something like right side up instead of upside down so that they can see when it fills up with water. Some of you may have high-tech dishwashers. Some of you might not have a grandson pushing buttons to like stop the cycle. We all face different obstacles. So maybe the little seasoning bowl idea will resonate with someone. Okay. And I feel like everybody says like, oh, we have hard water. I'm not talking about like just getting spots on the glasses. People always assume that's what I mean. Like, I'm just worried about, the glasses not being perfectly clear. No, there's a chemistry issue where the dishes literally don't get clean unless we use that vinegar. Like, it just somehow doesn't work without it. And sometimes when I remember, I even put a little bit of vinegar in the sink when I fill up my sink with the, hot water and dishwashing liquid. But the reason it's not as mandatory when you're hand washing is because obviously you're scrubbing the dishes until they are visibly clean with the soapy water before you rinse them. Whereas in the dishwasher, you're counting on the water pressure and the actual chemistry of the detergent and the water and whatnot to get the dishes clean. There's not an actual brush scrubbing them, if that makes sense. So anyway, when I'm hand washing, if you're wondering, I usually use the Scrub Mommy, where it's like a little sponge. It has an abrasive side to get any crumbs off or whatever. And then it has a soft side to kind of degrease the item. That's a kind of a favorite thing that I'm using right now. Of course, I also have a bottle brush, not just for my granddaughter's baby bottles, but also for just skinny glasses, champagne flutes, things like that. If anybody else's kids drink milk out of a champagne flute, you know that it's nice to have a bottle brush to clean that glass. I realize not everything I say is relatable, but I feel like when I'm coming up with these weird scenarios, like people out there are like, yes, I know about that. So some of you might. Anyway, just be plugging away on your dishes, whatever that means for you. And then, of course, when you're done with the dishes, you're going to work on cleaning the surfaces of your kitchen. The main ones are your countertops, your stovetop, the sink, and, maybe your dining room table. But some of you have other things to contend with. Some of you need to clean a high chair. Some of you need to wipe down your cabinets today or clean out a refrigerator, a microwave. Some days you go deeper than others. When you're facing a disaster and you have more than one sink load or more than one dishwasher load, a lot of times that kind of means it's not the day to scrub the outsides of your cabinets or clean your microwave or refrigerator. But of course, you don't go too long without doing those things, because the idea is that if you keep listening to the show and you're consistent with your cleaning, you'll be able to go deeper in future cleaning sessions. So if you're new to the show, or if you've just kind of fallen off the housework wagon, you've been busy, you've been sick, you've been depressed, I understand. You might just be doing your dishes, giving your countertops and stovetop a swipe. Okay. That's kind of the minimum. And if you don't have a lot of dishes today, of course, you're going to tackle more surfaces and you're going to work from the top down. Like if you have an over the stove microwave, obviously you would wipe that out before wiping the stovetop and countertops. If you're cleaning upper cabinets, you'd wipe those before the countertops and so on. So just be working in the kitchen, do your dishes, clean surfaces in the time allotted. And then, of course, we're going to end with sweeping and mopping your floor. And, of course, there are other bonus tasks. You know about this. Wiping down walls, wiping down switch plates, organizing your pantry, all the things. Okay, a baseboard. Okay, one baseboard is enough. You can do another one another day, unless you're having company and you want to do all your baseboards right now. But those are tasks for when you have time. But while you're working on dishes, I wanted to talk about this thing with opening and closing shifts. Can you think back to when you were working in a restaurant or something? I feel like a lot of people have worked in a restaurant. Like, who hasn't? Maybe you haven't, but think back to working in a restaurant. Maybe you show up to open and then somebody is like, whoever closed last night didn't do their job or something like that. Okay? Because when people do certain things during the closing shift, it sets up the morning crew for success. Okay. And then whatever the morning crew does sets them up for success and the next shift up for success. It's things that they're doing to prepare for the day. So here's how this fits in with cleaning the kitchen. Closing shift in the kitchen should be doing all the dishes after dinner. No judgment here if you didn't. We're just talking about what's ideal and what's going to make things easier on you in the future. But everybody knows that the ideal is going to bed with a clean kitchen. And it's so beneficial to put your leftovers away so you don't waste them. Do all the dishes and wipe down your countertops and stovetop before going to bed. Okay. Then in the morning, during that opening shift, so to speak, because I've been talking about this thing of like running your home kind of like a business, because some of us have a good work ethic outside the home, but then we kind of drop the ball when it comes to managing our housework. There are things you can do in the morning to set yourself up for success, like maybe taking something out of the freezer to thaw, maybe setting out some items for your kids. I used to have a neighbor who would kind of create like a charcuterie board type thing for her kids to graze on during homeschooling. Okay, she was homeschooling and she did this thing where she'd have like she'd cut up little bits of cheese and fruits and vegetables and whatever else for them to kind of snack on throughout the day. That was kind of her morning setup that she would do. And they even have containers that you can get to keep, these things cool. Like instead of on an actual charcuterie board, like, Pampered Chef, Chill and Serve or whatever. This isn't sponsored or anything. I'm just saying there are items that you can get to kind of keep that cool. That's an idea for somebody, especially if you're homeschooling, having these snacks available. The grazing thing might not work well for everybody. Some people might be like, oh, my kid would get food all over the house. But for a certain age group, it's effective. Okay. So that's a thing. When someone does the closing shift right, meaning someone in your house did the dishes and wiped down surfaces, you can do other things to set up your day for success, which could be meal prepping. It could even be, starting a loaf of bread, whatever. But if nobody closes properly, in the morning, you're dealing with that aftermath of the night before. And let's face it, the food is dried on the dishes, the pans. It takes a lot longer. It's a super depressing way to start your day. It causes you to start off behind, and then you're not really thinking about things like meal prepping or baking a loaf of bread. Now, I realize some of you work long hours and don't have time to bake bread, but it's just an example of things that you might want to do in the kitchen. You're more likely to start that crock pot or set out some ingredients to bake bread if you're waking up to a clean kitchen. And that happens when a proper closing shift happens. I was talking to my husband about this yesterday, and I was telling him about how I wanted to talk about this thing of like closing shifts and opening shifts at a restaurant and how it's the same at home. And he cooked dinner for me last night. He usually cooks on the weekends. We were alternating cooking when I was working full time. But since he likes to cook, now he's kind of taking the weekend shifts more for cooking, and I'm cooking during the week. Well, last night was a Sunday night. He was cooking dinner, and I was already just like over the moon about this breaded chicken that he made. But I walk into the kitchen and I look, and he's got all of the dishes done just shortly after dinner. He's got all of the dishes done. He's wiped everything down, and he has even frozen some of the extra chicken breasts in little individual baggies so that people can like heat those up and put them on a hamburger bun or whatever, and make like a, chicken sandwich. And it's all cleaned up. And I'm like, oh, I see that you did all the dishes. I was like super happy about it. And he's like, yeah, I closed. I mean, I swooned right there, because it meant that he was listening to me when I was rambling about my podcast, and that just he wanted to be the type of guy who does that closing shift in the kitchen. He closed, and I was like, yeah, you did close, because he even had frozen those chicken breasts, which was good, because you know how when you put your leftovers into the fridge, they kind of do their time and get thrown away. We kind of decided a long time ago that the ideal is to freeze the leftovers, because we're more likely to want to eat them several days later. We're going to want something different the next day. So I don't know, though. Those chicken breasts are so good. I think people would have eaten them up either way. But yeah, I just swooned that he was like listening to me. And when I had told him about it, it was a podcast idea. I was not hinting like, hey, one of us takes closing shift and one takes opening. I never said that. Okay. But yeah, it was super sweet. So just a thought there. And you might have to do both the opening and closing shift at your house. I'm not saying that he's automatically going to close every night or anything like that, but I was happy that he closed last night. Hopefully by now you're done with your dishes and you're quickly wiping down the surfaces of the kitchen, okay? I'll give you a couple more minutes to do that, and then we'll talk about sweeping and mopping. Before we talk about cleaning the floors while you're just doing your surfaces, I just wanted to give our financial supporters a shout out. There are actually 4 different ways to support the show financially. Probably the most convenient one would be if you are listening on an iPhone or other Apple device. You're probably already seeing the advertisements for Clean With Me Unplugged. Apple kind of just shows you those. If you click Start Trial, you'll gain access to additional bonus episodes. We go more personal in those episodes. I tell more stories in my bonus episodes that I make, and we're just more candid with you in those episodes. And what I'm trying to do going forward is to make those episodes longer. I recently made a 1-hour one, and I think another one that was like 39 minutes. I'm trying to make those longer, like more the whole house episodes, so to speak, as opposed to these free episodes that focus on maybe 1 or 2 areas of your home does. Another way to do it, which you can do on any type of device, is just to look at the episode notes, like the description of this episode. There'll be a link that says support this podcast, and it mentions Spreaker in the URL. When you click on that, you can sign up to support the show financially, and they will email you a link to listen to bonus episodes. Okay. Yet another way to do it is to support either Jessica or myself on Patreon. I know a lot of you listen to us both, but I also know that some of you have a favorite host. That's okay. You can pick one of us to support or support us both, but we each have our own Patreon. And if you're wondering how to access that, you can find instructions to support the show on cleanwithmepodcast.com. That's our homepage. Go to cleanwithmepodcast.com, click support the show, and then it'll give you instructions for the Apple subscription. And Apple Podcasts is just that purple icon on your iPhone, okay? So you might already be listening on that and not even realize it's called Apple Podcasts, but there's instructions for that. It mentions the Spreaker link thing, and then it has links to my Patreon page and Jessica's Patreon page. Last but not least, I have a couple people who just send me a donation via Venmo. And you can also do that with Jessica. Just get in touch with her about that. But you can always message us via Facebook Messenger, okay, via our names. And we can give you the Venmo information. So that's enough of a commercial there. It's time to sweep or mop your kitchen floor. If you're the type of person who just vacuums your whole house after the episode and doesn't do it while listening to the podcast, of course, like I mentioned earlier, this would be a great time to just do a walkthrough of your entire home and just straighten things up. Throw away trash, clear surfaces. Just get your house in order. But if you've got crumbs on your kitchen floor, it's time to sweep and then mop. So just be working on that for the next few minutes. Lately, I talked earlier about alarms. I wanted to touch on that a little bit. I don't know if I ended up saying it, but I started a bread alarm. Like, I have an alarm to remind me about picking kids up from school. My kids are in a hybrid private school where they go on certain days, and it gets confusing. So I have alarms that are repeating on certain days about picking them up from school. I don't know if anybody else needs that, but I definitely do. I don't want to be clock watching during the day. I like those alarm reminders. I also have an alarm at 4 o'clock to start dinner. I think about dinner in the morning during that opening shift, but by 4 o'clock, I need to be actively cooking dinner on most days. Obviously, I'm flexible. Things come up. You don't want to be too rigid. You want more of a routine than a schedule. If you have kids, you need to be flexible. And even just being flexible for your spouse. If you're married and you don't have kids and your spouse, invites you out to lunch, go for it, okay? I will drop everything when my husband takes me to lunch in the middle of the day. But I'm just saying, like, in general, I have these reminders that pop up. I can choose to ignore them, but I have one for starting dinner, and I just added a new one on starting bread because I'm wanting to bake bread several days a week. And some people are like, the last thing I'm going to do is bake bread. My daughter doesn't think it's that relatable when I talk about baking bread, but I have a bread machine, so it literally takes me like 5 minutes to start a loaf, and I'm planning to experiment with just using my dough cycle and then putting the bread in the oven. That's something I'm excited about. I know I mentioned it on another episode. I'm not sure if it was a free episode or bonus episode, but yeah, I started a bread alarm. I'm kind of excited about having more time, but if you're working full time and you're just in survival mode, I know the struggle, okay? I'm happy to be working part-time. I think sometimes when you're any kind of like podcaster or influencer, people don't realize that that's a job too. It takes us a long time to edit these episodes and whatnot. So I consider myself to be working part-time from home. That said, in some ways it doesn't feel like a job because I'm doing what I love. Have you ever heard that saying? Like, if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. I can't say enough about how excited I am about this new chapter because it's allowing me to give you more content that you need. I hope you are sweeping and mopping. One of the reasons I don't talk about the sweeping and mopping is just there's not a lot to say, but I guess I'll just go over kind of my sweeping and mopping routine. I like to go over the floor. I like to move the chairs out of the way. And here's a tip if you have little ones. if you have a kitchen table, you move your chairs into another room, right? But line them up, especially if you have like 6 chairs like we do, line them up and tell your little toddler to play choo-choo train, have them put their stuffed animals or their dolls in the chairs and, all aboard the choo-choo train, all aboard. And that will keep them busy to keep them out, to keep them from walking through your pile when you're sweeping or slipping on the wet floor. That's just something we do. We do have a gate in my grandson will be old enough for that all aboard the choo-choo train game. He probably is already old enough for it. We do have a gate where we gate off the kitchen. That's super helpful too. But when my kids were younger, my kitchen was not gated off. And I kind of discovered this by accident when my middle daughter, Erica, was like, all aboard the choo-choo train, all aboard, all aboard. She had one of those accents and she had lined up her stuffed animals in the chair and was playing like she was a train conductor or something. It was super cute. So then I started encouraging it when I would sweep and mop the floor because it gave me that few minutes I needed to just keep her out of the kitchen since I didn't have a gate at that time. I'm actually thinking about getting a second baby gate to gate off the hallway to where I can confine my grandson just to the living room in case I want to just like plop down on the couch and not have him like run into one of the back bedrooms because our house is not completely baby proof in every room. So we try to keep him in the living room when we're watching him. But maybe that chair thing will help you in some way. The next step is I like to go through with a dust mop. I call it a push broom, but a push broom is more like a real heavy duty thing you use like to clean out your garage or an industrial setting. A dust mop is kind of a different type of push broom. I'll use that first because I have kind of a large expanse of flooring, and then I'll use a traditional broom and dustpan to kind of sweep up the piles and do some edge work, so to speak. And then lastly, I use a Swiffer mop, the kind where you put on those pre-moistened pads. Those just work really well with our shiny tile. I like the way they smell. They're available in different scents. There's pet ones. This is not sponsored or anything, but all the cleaning products that I talk about, I have links for those. I have the Amazon links for those, and I can get a small commission from Amazon if you use my links to purchase those products. So you can go to cleanwithmepodcast.com, click on the product link, and you'll find links to everything that I talk about here. But that's just what works for us. That's one way of doing it. And then we also have this like sweeping and mopping machine. I'll be honest, I don't really even know how to use it, but my husband and teenage son use that. I'm still doing things the old-fashioned way at this point, but we've got that too. But I think it kind of needs a preliminary sweep before using that, or so I've heard. So however you clean your kitchen floor, maybe I've given you some ideas. When I used to use a traditional mop instead of the Swiffer, okay, just like a full-blown mop where, you're dipping it into water, wringing it out, and then mopping the floor, I would get the floor pretty wet because that's kind of how I clean. I don't like to scrub a lot. I like to use a lot of liquid. It's just the way I am. Then I would take a large bath towel. Only do this if you're physically fit. You're not going to fall and break a hip or something like that. Disclaimer. Do it if you can safely do this. But I would take a large bath towel and kind of walk it across my floor to get rid of that excess liquid from mopping. And that was part of the cleaning process too, because I was kind of shoving that towel up under the cabinets, places that the mop didn't necessarily reach, just cleaning by walking across the floor with that large towel and sliding it under my feet. And that also eliminated the issue of a toddler slipping on the freshly mopped floor. I didn't want to leave it wet. So these are just some ideas on sweeping and mopping in case you needed some tips. I don't want to make this episode too long, so I'm going to end it here. Even if you're not supporting the show financially, you're helping us just by listening. Be sure to click follow on whichever podcast app you use. I hope you got a lot done during this episode. Happy cleaning, and I'll talk to you soon.